There are moments in life that split your entire existence into two halves, the before and the after. Mine happened on a Tuesday morning, ordinary, quiet, the kind of morning where the sun comes in soft through the curtains and your coffee is still warm and you think, today is going to be fine. I remember standing in my kitchen, packing my daughter Lily's lunch. She was 6 years old. She had these little pigtails she insisted on wearing every single day because her kindergarten teacher once told her they made her look like a princess, and she believed it. Fully, completely, the way only a 6-year-old can believe something with her whole heart. I kissed her forehead. I told her I loved her more than the whole sky. And I meant it, every single word. I was a single mother, had been for 3 years since my divorce from Daniel. It wasn't a clean divorce. Nothing about Daniel was ever clean, but we had settled into something that looked, from the outside, like peace. He had his weekends with Lily, I had the rest. We didn't talk more than we had to. I had built my life back, brick by careful brick. A small apartment, a job I was proud of, a daughter who laughed like bells and slept tucked under a yellow blanket she'd named Sunshine. My life wasn't perfect, but it was mine. What I didn't know that Tuesday morning was that someone had already decided to take it. Her name was Sandra, Daniel's sister, my former sister-in-law, the woman who had sat beside me at my wedding, who had held Lily as a newborn and cried, actually cried, and told me I was the best thing that had ever happened to their family. Sandra, who smiled at every birthday party and texted me recipes on Sunday afternoons and called herself Lily's favorite auntie. That Sandra. She had filed a formal report with Child Protective Services 2 days earlier. I didn't know yet. The document was already sitting in a caseworker's hands, already being reviewed, already beginning to unravel everything I had built. The report said I was an unfit mother. It said I was emotionally unstable, that I was neglecting Lily, that my home was unsafe, that I had been seen behaving erratically in public, that my daughter had come to school looking unkempt and hungry. Every single word, a lie. But lies, when written in the right language, on the right form, submitted to the right office, they don't need to be true. They just need to be believed. The knock on my door came at 2:17 in the afternoon. I remember because I had just picked Lily up from school and she was sitting at the table coloring a butterfly. Purple wings, green body, because she said butterflies should be allowed to be any color they want. 2 people stood at my door. A woman with a clipboard and kind eyes that didn't match what she was about to say, and a man, quiet, standing slightly behind her like a shadow. "Miss Reyes, I'm a caseworker with Child Protective Services. We've received a report regarding your daughter. May we come in?" The world tilted. I stepped back. I let them in. I answered every question with shaking hands and a voice I fought to keep steady. I showed them the apartment, clean, warm, full of Lily's drawings pinned to the wall and her books stacked neatly by the couch. I showed them the fridge. I showed them Lily's bedroom with the yellow blanket and the nightlight shaped like a star. I did everything right, but the report had already done its damage. Before they left, the caseworker told me that pending investigation, Lily would be placed temporarily with her father. I watched them take my daughter's overnight bag. I watched Lily look back at me from the doorway, confused, not scared yet because she trusted me, and so she thought it must be okay. "Mama, are you coming?" "Soon, baby," I told her. "I'll see you very soon." I closed the door. I slid down against it until I was sitting on the floor, and I stayed there for a long time, in a silence so heavy I could feel it pressing against my chest like a stone. The investigation was supposed to take 2 weeks. It took 43 days. 43 days without waking up to Lily's footsteps padding down the hall. 43 days without her voice asking for pancakes or her hand slipping into mine. 43 days of phone calls that were never long enough and video chats where she'd hold up drawings she'd made, still drawing those butterflies, and tell me she missed me with eyes that were trying so hard to be brave. She was 6 years old and she was trying to be brave for me. That broke me more than anything else. In those early days, I cried. I won't pretend otherwise. I cried until I had nothing left, and then I sat in the empty and tried to understand what had happened. Who had done this? Why? It didn't take long to find out. A mutual friend, a woman named Grace, who had known both me and Sandra for years, called me one evening. Her voice was careful, the way people sound when they're about to say something that will hurt you. "I need to tell you something," she said, "and I need you to stay calm." She told me that Sandra had been seen having dinner with Daniel, not unusual, but she'd also overheard something, a conversation. Sandra on the phone, laughing, saying the words, "The report is already filed. It'll buy him enough time." Buy him enough time. I sat with those words for a long time. Enough time for what? That's when I started to dig. And what I found shattered me in a different way. Not the way grief shatters you, but the way truth does, when it's ugly and sharp and too clear to deny. Daniel was planning to petition for full custody, had been planning it for months, but he knew that in our state, judges rarely displaced a primary caregiver without cause. He needed cause. He needed a reason. He needed someone to look like they were protecting Lily, not him taking her, but the system stepping in. So Sandra had created the reason. She had drafted that report carefully, strategically. She had used real details. A day Lily went to school with mismatched socks because she had insisted on dressing herself. A moment at a grocery store where I'd been firm with Lily on candy and someone had seen us and thought I was harsh. Small, innocent, ordinary moments of motherhood, twisted, reframed, weaponized. She had handed them to a government system and let the machine do the rest. And the machine had. The worst part wasn't the betrayal itself. It was the intimacy of it. Sandra knew me. She had access to me, to the small, imperfect details of my life, because I had trusted her, because I had let her in. I had sat across from her at kitchen tables and shared things you only share with family. And she had taken all of it and sharpened it into a knife. I remember calling her. I know I shouldn't have. I was still too raw, too unsteady. But I called her, and when she answered, her voice was soft, and she said, "Oh, sweetheart, I was doing this for Lily." I hung up. Because I realized in that moment that the most dangerous people in your life are not the ones who hate you openly. They are the ones who smile while they erase you. I stopped crying after that. Not because the pain went away, but because something shifted inside me. Something quiet and determined and cold in the best possible way. I had been spending 43 days trying to survive. I decided it was time to start fighting. I called a lawyer. Her name was Attorney Priya Anand, and she had the kind of calm energy that made you feel, for the first time in weeks, like the ground beneath you was solid. I laid everything out in front of her, the report, the timeline, Grace's account of Sandra's phone call, the custody filing Daniel had quietly submitted, which, as Priya pointed out, had been prepared before the CPS report was filed. Before, which meant the report wasn't a reaction to concern, it was a strategy. "That's called fraud," Priya said simply, "and we're going to prove it." We did. It took careful, meticulous, unglamorous work. It wasn't dramatic. There were no shouting matches or courtroom explosions. It was documents and dates and timelines that told a story all on their own without anyone having to raise their voice. We subpoenaed Daniel's attorney's records, which showed the custody petition had been drafted 6 weeks before the report was filed. We pulled phone records that placed Sandra's call, the one Grace had overheard, on the same day CPS received the filing. We gathered character statements from Lily's teacher, her pediatrician, my neighbors, person after person who knew us, who had seen us, who could speak to who I was as a mother. And Grace. Grace agreed to give a formal statement. When it all came together, it didn't explode. It settled, like pieces of a puzzle finally lying flat, the picture undeniable. The judge reviewed everything in a clothed session. She was a woman in her 50s with silver-streaked hair and glasses she wore low on her nose, and she read every page with the kind of attention that made the room feel very still. Then she looked up. She called what Sandra had done a deliberate misuse of a child welfare system designed to protect vulnerable children. She called it serious. She called it an abuse of process. She ordered Lily returned to my care immediately. She referred Sandra's actions to the county prosecutor's office for review of potential fraud and false reporting charges. And she denied Daniel's custody petition entirely, noting that a parent who orchestrates false allegations to manipulate a family court does not demonstrate the kind of character the court rewards with custody of a child. I was sitting at the plaintiff's table when she said those words. My hands were folded in my lap, and I was very still, the way you are when you've been holding yourself together for so long that stillness has become a kind of armor. I didn't cry in that courtroom. I cried in the parking lot, alone in my car with my head against the steering wheel. Not from sadness, from the particular exhaustion of surviving something that was designed to destroy you. I picked Lily up that afternoon. She ran to me across the hallway, pigtails flying, arms wide, and she said, "Mama, I knew you were coming. I told Sunshine you were coming." I held her for a long time, longer than she wanted probably because she started wiggling and asking if we could get ice cream. I said yes. I would have said yes to anything in that moment. Sandra faced a formal investigation. She was ultimately charged with filing a false report, a misdemeanor, not a felony, but it went on her record. She lost her position on the board of a local nonprofit she had served for years. The social circles that defined her world contracted quickly and quietly, the way they do when a person's reputation cracks. I didn't celebrate it. I want to be honest about that. I had wanted justice, but when it came, it felt less like victory and more like stillness, like the end of something that had taken far too much. What I learned, what I carry with me now in the bones of who I am, is this. The people who betray us most deeply are almost never strangers. They are the ones who sat at our table, who knew our coffee order, who held our children. They are the ones we trusted because trust is what we offered, and we were right to offer it, even if they were wrong to take it. Because the answer to betrayal is not to close yourself. It is to become more careful about who you open to. It is to learn the difference between the people who love you and the people who love what knowing you gives them. It is to remember when the floor is gone and you are sitting against a door in an empty apartment that you are still the author of your story, even when someone else has tried to rewrite it. They handed a document to a system and said, "She is unfit." And I stood up in that system, page by page, truth by truth, and I said, "Watch me." Lily still draws butterflies. Purple wings, green bodies, sometimes gold. She says butterflies should be every color they want. She's right, and so should we.